Hello, Internet friends, and welcome back to Patrox Radio. I'm your host, Patrox, and today I wanted to do a bit of a simpler approach for an episode and get into some basics, some things that I feel we can apply to our everyday lives and make small changes that'll add up to big effects later on. Now, some of you may have already heard of zero waste, but may not be as familiar with circular economics. And for those of you who just want to hear a textbook definition and then leave, I got the small samples from Wikipedia for you. I'm going to read off real quick. But for those of you who want to stick around, I thought it'd be more productive to give you things that I already do day in and day out, and maybe even a few extras that I can toss in that I know people around me do. But I also wanted to branch off into 5 ideas of how we could expand this concept, these two concepts together on local levels, such as, if you work with local businesses or if you want to encourage your local businesses to do one thing or the other to adopt change. So, as far as zero waste goes, according to Wikipedia, uh, it's just the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. According to Wikipedia, circular economics is a model of production and consumption that involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling existing materials and products as long as possible. Circular economics aims to tackle global challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, waste, and pollution by emphasizing the design based implementation of the three base principles of the model. The three principles required for the transformation to a circular economy are eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials, and the regeneration of nature. Simple, easy to understand, but I don't feel like they quite encapsulate everything. Like, we can honestly really simplify the idea of circular economics as the uh God, what did I say it was last time? I like to imagine it as just the local recycling of local materials is kind of how I simplified it for some people. And even though that's not true in the strictest of sense, or even in loose sense, um, you really need to think about how your materials that are in your hand and every bit of plastic waste or just throwaway trash that you give away, what is the entire lifespan of this material? Where does it go start to finish? And if that's the case, that these things have a negative impact, how can we fix that? If we can extend the use of things instead of letting them degrade in landfills, well, of course, that's a positive, that's a benefit. But then, if all we do is make flimsy materials, that can't stand up to reuse, well, then we're going to have a lot of waste. So unless we find ways to create, sturdier products, packaging that's designed to be reused, chemicals or products and chemicals or whatever have you that are easy to recycle and not things that are so difficult to break down. And you could also reconsider things that do break down. How do you want that to release its chemicals back into nature? You want things to be biodiverse. You want to be biocompatible. You want it to be more than just technically biodegradable. These are small elements that you can introduce both personally and, in a local area, when thinking about ways to apply circular economic pushes and pressures for, people to make changes. As far as zero waste goes, I think it's better understood as a more broad approach rather than a goal of perfection. It is a very easy trap for people to get stuck into this idea that unless you're 100% zero waste, unless you're 100% trash free, unless you're 100% carbon neutral or even carbon negative, then you can't say you're zero waste. You can't say you're trying to live an eco lifestyle. You can't do this, you can't do that. And it's a lot of pressure you're putting on yourself. It's a lot of pressure I put on myself for a very long time. And so personally, I really just like to think of zero waste as the effort you make to minimize waste, you know? Another thing that I heard that I thought was a great way to introduce this is also to reduce the amount of materials that need to be recycled. If there are things such as, the option to not use plastic bags, the option to, negate silverware or cutlery or anything from, your local food chain restaurants or what have you. Like these are also things that you can do to minimize your impact and to minimize the waste that you yourself directly consume and interact with. Um, it's not the nice answer that a lot of people like to have because they feel like it's not enough and so they immediately don't want to participate in, but I think it's still the healthiest approach because then you're not holding yourself to an ungodly standard that no one can really attain, and then you're stuck in a self-hating and self-doubtful pit of despair the whole time. It's not good, it's not healthy, and it's not productive, but while I was thinking of ideas for this episode, like I said, I had constructed a list of things that I already do as examples to help you guys out. So I got 15 already listed out of things that I have done or do actively every day to help minimize my impact as much as I can. The first one being if the place that I want to go shop at is like within a mile or half a mile most of the time, I just choose to walk or ride a bike instead of driving there. Obviously, it reduces my impact on the road, it reduces the amount of cars on the road, which frees up the amount of traffic and available road space. However, living in the United States and North America as a whole, a lot of our road infrastructure is designed to be car centric, not pedestrian or bike centric. And that makes it very hard when people want to migrate across, a small town when there's nothing but roads and hardly a sidewalk to see. Luckily, in my specific area, it's not as much of an issue, but it's not something that can be applicable to everyone in every case. So that should be also understood going into this. Not every option is applicable for everyone. And don't beat yourself up if you look at this entire list and say, I can't do any of that. I don't think that that's true, but I would still understand it, and I still don't think that that's something to hold against yourself because then there are conditions in your life that you have to examine and change based upon your need and your actions. It's not something I can say is yes or no. Um, with that being said, point number two is that reusable items such as bags, glass jars, or delivery containers go much farther than we like to admit. And I like to think that that's so much more true, especially whenever you go to certain areas that give you those nice clasped not jars, but containers with those seal tight lids that you can just use as storage containers the whole time. Like, not the clamshell ones, but the a lot of Chinese takeout I've seen start using them whenever I order soup or whatnot. Um, or like a poke bowl. I'll get a lot of these types of bowls, and I just have a bunch of them. Haven't needed to buy any more Tupperware in a long time. I use that for takeout, or I use that for leftovers whenever I go to work. I just bring that container, an appropriate size container, because I have so many different sizes. And then if I have like loose things on my desk, I can use them to hold, random screws or coins or anything like that. And like there is a use. But that also means that within a limit, you also have to realize when you start seeing that you're just bringing home containers, not bringing home trash, then you have to start asking yourself, when do I start bringing home new containers and how do I minimize that waste? But that's a question for down the line. If you grew up in a Latin household, an Asian household, or just a mostly not white household, if you will, uh, you'll probably have grown up with the habit of like holding onto jars and everything, from like napkins to ketchup packets to salt and pepper packets. Like I do this all the time, and I used to think it was a bad hoarding problem, and to a degree, depending on how you treat it, I still kind of think it is. However, these are actually habits that also have a great impact on reducing your direct waste whenever you do get these things. However, of course, if you can minimize getting it in the first place, I would do it. But if not, these holding on to these things to use whenever you can uh, does minimize your impact greatly, much more than we'd like to admit. With that point number three being to cook at home and to cook a lot more veggies. Now, this will get into a point that I want to talk about in a later video about veganism as a whole, because I'm not against it, but I'm a big meat eater. I love eating it, and especially being on the keto diet. I like getting a lot of it. The problem is if you look at the large upstream effects of the cattle industry and the agricultural industry, uh, even one of these separately, but both of them combined are not sustainable in any fashion. And not only that, are they not sustainable? They're actively uh, destroying lands that they occupy. Just look at CAFOs, probably a specific subject that we'll talk about. These are breeding farms by which they hold, I believe, dairy cows for the majority of their life until they're ready to die, in which they'll get slaughtered and sent to the slaughterhouse. You could also just look at any the pig farms or anything like that. Just look at chicken coops. That's a very famous example. Just looking at chicken farms. It's ridiculous. It's toxic, and it's also a gross abuse of our natural resources. Um, I do believe in eating more veggies, and with that, eating what you can get locally. It saves you money up front whenever you just cook at home instead of paying, and whatever you do going to eat out every night or to buy a ready quick meal that's already prepared for you at the grocery store. It limits a lot of waste that you would contribute to upstream products or food chains, such as the plastic containers and everything that is done, all the driving for distribution and the gas that was used to travel the products both to the facilities that make your food and also to you, XYZ. If you do wind up buying your veggies and groceries more locally, you can ensure that this stays in a local economic system instead of going to a very limited amount of multi-billion-dollar corporations. Number four would be waste from cooking can always have uses, such as using ends from things like onions and carrots or celery can be used to make vegetable broths. Peels from fruits and certain veggies can also be used to naturally flavor water and helps me pull away from sodas too. So, personal health benefit and a way to limit my waste. Let me give you some prime examples: cucumber and lemon water. Easy to implement and really easy to give water new life if you don't like drinking water, but you do want to make a very genuine effort from pulling away from like fast food sodas and drinks and stuff of that nature. A lot of times I'll even take some orange peels if I have enough of them, or just citrus peels in general, and I will dehydrate them in my oven for 3-ish hours until they're very brittle and very hard, and I will break them up until they can be of a loose incense, in which case I can burn that in my house, and it smells fantastic. Everyone I've let smell it has loved it so far. Uh, you can even if you don't want to like eat it, you can also just compost whatever waste you have, or try to grow veggies from it if it is enough of the right process for which the vegetable can regrow. It's dependent upon the vegetable. Number five, easy enough. Compost and recycle wherever and however you can. I know not everyone lives in an area where they do automatic recycling. Luckily, my parents do, but I do not. So I'm working on a possible video for the YouTube channel of a recycling setup, like a hamper setup that's reusable, so I can dump all my recyclables at a dump off site that's a little bit ways down the road from me. So like there's always options if you're willing to make the effort. It just takes a little bit of research and understanding of what's going on. I even have a compost bin out in my patio. But if I lived on the first floor, I'd try to take advantage of getting some worms in there as well, but I do not, so I do not have that advantage. Also, mold can be an issue if you don't know how to properly deal with composting. That is a lesson I am learning. So just be aware of that in the future. Item number six: use what you have before buying anything in the attempt to go green. The best items are the ones we already have. Now, this can apply to you in a myriad of ways, and I really think that this is the one that no one has an excuse to. No one has absolutely nothing that they cannot change, in my opinion, to something that is more green in a way that causes the least amount of harm. Especially if that option is use the damn thing you already have. Let's talk about a hairbrush. You want to make the most economically impactful choice, and you decide, hey, I want to go green. How can I contribute my hairbrush? Well, you don't. You don't need to. Just make sure that the hairbrush you use is still usable as long as you have it. Never change it out, never get rid of it. Don't make the attempt to use a new hairbrush that was made out of bamboo just because it was made out of bamboo. You don't need a new hairbrush. You don't need to make eco swaps of your food containers if you already have a bunch of them like I do. I can't tell you how many videos I see recommend things like glass, Pyrex or Tupperware bowls or something like that. And I think, yeah, that's great, but I don't need to buy more. I already have containers, you know? And so these are things that you can apply to yourself and figure out what is really best to change and what doesn't need to be changed. And this will be different from person to person. And even from like your friends or siblings or anything like that, they may have items that you would think you don't need, but they do. So shaming them or guilting them into changing that product is not a good answer either. Number seven, start experimenting with at home recipes for things like dry shampoo, conditioner bars, soap, or incense making. Not only would you be experimenting with natural processes that can limit waste and water usage, but you can also engage in new hobbies and lifestyle changes that'll do nothing but benefit you. So, depending, of course, on the hobby you choose and the activity you participate in, you can find a lot of things that not only give you a much more interesting way to spend your time and give you something else to make your personality shine. But you can also engage in making the exact products you'll use every day, like shampoo, like incense, if you're like me, or etc. Candles too are a big one that I'll do. Um, Finding ways to do these naturally and with the waste products you're already going to toss anyways is a great way to use up the material resources you already have, save yourself money on things that you don't no longer need to buy, and give yourself a firmer understanding of how these things work depending on your hobby. I like incense making. That is one thing I enjoy, but it's not a hobby I do very often because I really only make it for me and I don't burn that much that quickly, and I usually make a lot in one go. So things that I wanted to do, since I have very long, greasy hair a lot of the times, is I wanted to look into dry shampoos as a way to really minimize my impact. How is dry shampoo going to be affected in my hair? What recipes are going to work to really take care of this without the need to constantly go back to a second cleaner back in the shower just to make sure I'm good? How are conditioner bars even going to work in my hair because I have very thin hair? Blah, blah, blah. Like, these are questions that you're going to have to ask yourself and questions I'm asking myself to really investigate what's going to work best for you, but also things that you can enjoy doing and teaching to other people. Or if you just really want to, you can practice and make a buttload of one thing and have a bunch to hand out to your friends and family members. I'm a weird person who very much likes, bar soap. So if I make a crap load of it, probably not going to need all of it, but I can give some of it to friends and family who may enjoy something that was handmade, that is scented with, probably natural oils that I'll find in the area or things that I have purchased from a sustainable source, blah, 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 the best that I can. And I'm sure not only with that, but they would appreciate a handmade gift from somebody that they care about. And now, we all have a new conversation piece. If one of my friends or family members gets really interested and asks me, for more, I can also always bring up the opportunity of just showing them how to do it, how easy it is. You know, I can make everything so much easier that way. We all could. But it just takes the effort to say, hey, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna try this. And that's a thing that's hard for a lot of people. We procrastinate. We get very apathetic towards actually doing anything. We get very lethargic from ever moving off the couch because it's so easier just to press a button to watch Netflix or YouTube. And I get it. I get it. One of the ways that I kick my ass out of that is that I'll buy the ingredients for a hobby that I'll have a momentary interest in, but I'll organize it in one specific place in my apartment. And whenever I get in that moment again where I have nothing to do and I just want to sit on the couch and just watch YouTube for 12 hours a day because I'm not healthy to my own psyche, I can then have that moment and say, you know what? No, we have all this here. We don't have the excuse of saying we have to go to the store. We don't have the excuse of saying we don't have everything we need because we made sure of that when we eliminate our own excuses. So when I get into that moment, I can say, okay, fine, fuck it. Let's try it. That's how I got into incense making. I said, fuck it. Let's get into it. Let's see what we can do here. Um, it was because I had a bunch of lemon peels and flowers that were like drying out and I needed something to do with it. And I was originally just going to toss it in the compost bin. But then I had watched several incense making videos of them using just those ingredients and making incense sticks. And I thought, okay, and there you go. It doesn't even have to even be on purpose, but like when you allow yourself the opportunity to explore, try, and fail, I think is crucial. Be willing to fail at a new task, something that you've never tried before, just to see what happens. I think you can really find new appreciation and enjoyment in certain things that you try. But moving on to number eight, support your local economies over big companies. So much can be said about this specific topic. So again, we're going to leave this for another day. But put simply, yeah, when you work on keeping things local, in general, you can find a decrease in expenditures and usage of materials in a variety of categories, including energy consumption, including gas usage and travel, including labor and time, all kinds of things. Number nine, when we use renewable energy for your power supply and energy provider, and if you can, I currently use solar power electricity. However, there is a still general problem of the fact that it's thrown into a kind of just general grid that the the gas and oil industry also throw their energy into. So it's still kind of like muddied the waters, but I do pay for the energy from solar panels to be put onto that grid, if that makes technical sense. And I think that urging more push and concerted efforts to do so is fantastic, but with that also needs to go hand in hand the willingness to sponsor research into energy storage. Uh, but with that said, we can always jump into renewables and energy storage into a future episode. But number 10, develop the habits to limit energy usage from lights and AC if natural light is abundant and the weather isn't terrible. This is anything from leaving your windows and doors open to let the air circulate, to using lights that are on independent power sources. I do have some of those in my own apartment. I have a Jackery set with string lights around the living room, and the Jackery set has its own solar power charger, so I don't even run most of my lights at night or anything from the wall outlet. I always am pretty good about keeping the AC off since I live in a decent part of my area in Houston that the weather isn't always terrible, so I can often leave the window and my patio door open and just be fine. And that saves me quite a bit actually compared to a lot of my friends that I've heard. Easy one, number 11, shop secondhand wherever you can. Now, this is something that I do practically anywhere and everywhere I can as far as clothes that aren't bought by my family members. I have a very big problem, though, of my family buying clothes for me before I'm ready to buy new clothes. And so even though my direct impact purchases are secondhand, a lot of the items I receive are not, and it's very hard to like tell them no. But wherever you can, do make the effort. This includes even just like using Marketplace for anything used or going to Goodwill. I do that a lot to try to find, not only art pieces to put on the wall, but also I've gotten a few kitchen supplies, just offhand from there that have served me great since then. I have my table is secondhand for my family, stuff like that. It's always easier to upcycle, old items like that. Number 12, develop better lifestyle choices with the intent to be active, eat healthier, and decrease time spent online and indoors alone. In general, it's easy to point out that when you're not at home, you're not using a lot of consumables like electricity and water and internet, directly. So not only is it saving you more money and having less direct impact, but you're also making the active concerted effort to just be more outside, which will have the benefit of making you happier whenever you integrate yourself more into nature more frequently. But it would also allow you to be more connected and aware with your surroundings, including your people, the people around you, the community that you're a part of, and just the general surroundings of the nature and the outdoors. Providing this integration, I think, is very fundamental on an emotional level to getting to this point that I think we all should have in our frame of reference. So I really think that that's a big one because it affects more than just a direct intent to reduce your waste. It goes very far in helping you establish a good internal core for your independent identity. It allows you an easier avenue to reconnect with society from that individual sense, if you will. Number 13, use water filters for your drinking water to limit plastic being introduced into your house. Easy example. If you're the type of person who wants to just buy, Dasani or Aquafina bottles all the time, even if you buy the big gallon jugs or the 5, 6 gallon ones that have that pour tap, but you buy a new one each time you are introducing new plastic into your house, no matter the choice that you make, even if you scale up the water that you buy. Instead, just get a water filter that you can apply onto your faucet or get a filtered pitcher that will allow you to have potable water that's already been filtered out and safe to drink. Not only does this reduce the amount of waste that you have altogether, you're limiting the amount of plastic waste that you introduce, up front, which also means that you're not directly supporting a lot of the big corporations that profit off of water, which water commodification is, again, an issue on its own. But that is a super dense topic and one that I personally do not understand anywhere near enough to get into right now. So apologies. So item number 14, do not let yourself get caught up with the idea of needing the latest gadgets. Repair over replace. Now this goes to anything and everything that you own that's electronic. Your computers, your phone, the microphones that you use to record all your personal podcasts and videos on, your TV if you can. I'd be amazed if you could do that one though. Just anything though. If you have a broken piece of technology, your vacuum cleaner is also, an example of appliances that you can also try to repair or replace. I, if you got a washer or dryer that's acting funny, don't replace it. Learn how to repair it. Save yourself money and time, and give that product extended life. Now, of course, this is not always applicable for everyone in every situation, but it is applicable in most people's situations. Even the laptop and the microphone and the cell phone I use right now are all secondhand products. It's all very possible, very tangible, and often can even save you money if you buy secondhand gadgets like this. If you can keep the extended life of these products going, we can reduce the amount of e-waste that are filling up our landfills, and arguably is one of the most disastrous modern pieces of waste material that we have introduced. Lastly, number 15, study and understand politics, vote, and apply social pressure to help encourage and enact legitimate change. This is the point where I tell you, be the little activist that I've been that this podcast is for, and that I've been trying to tell you guys so far. You got to be very aware and cognizant of your surroundings and those that are in power. So when everyone feels like things are getting hostile, getting angry, and nothing's getting fixed, you can explain to them why it's happening. And so that way, if they start spreading little lies and myths, you can correct that early on and be like, no, here's the facts. Now don't spread that around. Let's focus on the truth, and be more productive and move forward that way. You won't get everyone, but trust me, you being there helps so many more people than you know. Then it's crazy. Even with my own family and my circle, it happens a lot, and thank God I have built the social rapport with most of them that they come to me and ask, what's going on with this? Can you break this down? Can you simplify this? What is going on? It takes time. I mean, most of my friends that have asked me this, I've known for maybe 5 plus years, and most of that time was building up that social rapport. But guess what? These Most of these friends are lifelong friends. Most of these friends understand something to a degree of what I'm talking about. So it's not like all is lost, but it's also like a lot to deal with, as far as the distance you need to cover in order to earn that trust and get them to understand. Um, but also, it allows you to understand where more fine-tuned problems are that people may not see, and so it gives you an edge in order to try to understand, if not solve, that problem. Other things that I haven't seen, or other things that I haven't done, but I have seen friends and family members have do. Just real quick, as they have come to my mind, dumpster diving is a big one. I had a friend who was a vegan who dumpster dived, but he was the type of vegan who, like, if there was meat in there that was still good to eat, he would take the meat and he would cook it and eat it. But otherwise, any product he bought or like pulled out of the dumpster was actively vegetables and stuff. And he worked very hard to do that. And you know what? I'm kind of jealous that I did not hold myself to that standard, but he did. So the veganism and the dumpster diving, two very critical things that have helped and have seen people in my personal life do. Another one that goes back to repair over replace. My mother likes to go through a lot of furniture, but she always buys secondhand. She always buys off of Marketplace, and a lot of furniture she'll buy broken. So they'll either be very cheap or they'll be free, and she'll go in and fix it, and then later, whenever she's done and ready to trade it out with something new, she'll sell it for more because she's repaired it and gave it new life that other people, and the quality that she did made other people want it too whenever she was done. Whatever she can't, of course, she does get rid of, but she also tries to do her best to compensate and stuff. With, like, now she's trying to compost where she can. Um, so there's always something you can do. There's always ways you can try. I've even heard of people in Asian families where they'll take citrus peels and freeze them because they work great as like pan scrubbers and stuff, which is I didn't even think of that before, but that's amazing. It's crazy what you can do whenever you're willing to explore and dig a bit more. But I do want to throw one more in that, depending on who you are, may be a little more morally dubious, I want to say. But I personally don't give a shit because fuck companies. But don't be afraid to use office supplies. Office supplies go missing all the time. Office supplies, consumables like paper, tape, even occasionally water and soda if you work in a company or office that provides such things on a regular basis. Don't be afraid to take them. Don't be afraid to hoard them if you can do an amount that doesn't raise eyebrows and get you in trouble, and it's going to be case by case. You're going to have to determine that alone. But don't be afraid to take it. If corporations are already going to steal from you and the public, you might as well steal what you can back from them. These things are okay. I personally don't care. If you need someone to give you permission, I think it's okay. In general, don't apply the practice of stealing to anything else. Specifically, stealing from your job office supplies like consumables like paper clips, papers, and drinks or something like that, I think is okay. Use your brain and be critical. Though again, I must say I do not endorse theft. I have to legally say I do not endorse theft. Okay? But I do have five other points that I wanted to bring up that I thought might work to engage your community and to apply not only zero waste habits but also start a local circular economic system going. You know, such as if you were trying to get a river to feed itself, to power itself, hypothetically. Just work with that thought experiment. I know it's not physically feasibly possible. But number one, you can shop at places that use compostable takeout or are generally a zero waste shop. Encourage this behavior in your local shops. One prime example is that one of my favorite burger shops that I go to, uh, all of their takeout is done in plastic, or not plastic, in paper compostable clamshells, and they have always been willing to accommodate me whenever I ask for no plastic or silver or anything because I live very close to them. I just walk there. I just say, hey, I just need the clamshells. I'm good with everything else. And luckily, I've gone there often enough. They remember me and they're like, we got you. And so I grab my food, I walk home, and I'm good. Uh, Item number two, you can start up, work with, or support local mutual aid or charity groups working towards helping your community or cleaning up the area directly. We will definitely dive into mutual aid versus charity groups in the future, but as a whole, working with organizations or groups that want to minimize impacts and ease of action in the local economy is really going to help you a lot and easing stress and impact with shared action. Number three, encourage recycling and composting sites for the community in your local town meetings. I highly stand by this. If you can encourage a lot of your local small town governments to really invest and look towards ways that to minimize impact, including recycling and composting sites held by the local government. Even if they don't all do it, it encourages pressures in neighboring counties and cities and municipalities to look into these options. And the more aggressive that we get about it, the more impact that we can have. You know, looking back at LA County, you were able to get them to ban styrofoam and single use plastics, I believe, in restaurants and stuff like that. Now, if we were able to pass a law like that here, imagine the impact we could also start spreading down here in the South. You know, number four, encourage businesses to withhold bags or cutlery or to charge them to encourage people not to grab what they don't need. And by that token, you should reject them if you don't need them. This is kind of one of those social things that can really be divisive. I can see some people are very glued to the ideas that they need to be catered to in every fashion, including with materials that will just get thrown away within the hour, such as plastic bags, plastic cutlery, napkins, straws, packaging for their products, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think necessarily in every community that being charged for that would be the best answer, but without businesses applying this pressure, I think there needs to be some way for us to apply this pressure on our peers to get us used to not grabbing more than what we need and really think about our day-to-day actions that cause us to be in this conflict inside and out. How often do we go shopping? How often do we go to the fast food shop to go grab something to eat? How often do we go grocery shopping and how much do we get? Blah blah blah. It's very problematic. Um, and easier ways to reduce this is also going to like farmers markets and bringing your own bags. It's an easy way to like reduce your waste in this fashion too. Go to farmers markets. I should have just put that one on there. But number five, help establish maker spaces and other communal projects like farmers markets or services to lessen items needed and space used. So this goes directly more into like land usage in a communal sense versus trying to use land in a private sense of setting up, independent businesses and such. Creating maker spaces, creating farmers markets or communal gardens, things of that nature are gonna go a long way in solidifying safety in the community and providing comfort amongst their neighbors. Also, using less of this land, by using it together, minimizes directly the material usage that we're going to have. Let's take example like a makerspace. Instead of, you have a neighborhood, let's say in this neighborhood you have 5,000 fathers, in this neighborhood. Of these 5,000 fathers, you could have two, three-fifths of them want to be able to do projects whenever, you know. Each of them, each of these 3,000 fathers can go out and buy themselves a tool set. They can go ahead and themselves buy, the place to hold all their tools, however they choose. They can go ahead and get all the little equipments and all the little supplies that they can use pieces of to build their projects. Now, a lot of these supplies are not always, built one item or not at a time. A lot of the equipment that they find that they'll wind up needing are very expensive, and they'll probably never need it again. But instead of buying all these tools that they'll probably repeatedly buy 3,000 times over, like a hammer or something, to needing, a lot of materials that are going to be overbought because more materials are going to be bought than are actually used, such as like with screws, nuts and bolts, stuff, washers of that nature, to needing high quality or expensive tools, very infrequently. They can instead use all of that aggregate money that they would use independently, come together, spend less collectively to create a high end space and get all the tools that they need, you know? Yes, you don't just get one hammer for 3,000 people, but you could probably get 300 hammers, and have enough for people to use that are actively going to use them at one time. And you can afford to get the high-end equipment that people will need offhand for certain projects without everyone going broke. You can also pay to have these sites filled with, the materials that everyone's going to need, so there's no rushing to the stores constantly to get your supplies of what you'll need help with. But you also have a reduced amount of overall cost to the supplies and tools that you need to get. That also makes maintaining the space much cheaper overall. This frees up space in everyone's garage or backyard, wherever your dad likes to set up shop. But it gives you not only more independence, it gives you more direct freedom in your day-to-day life to do what you choose. These things are nothing new. They're not monumental, they're not life-changing in a immediate sense. But these things are, I believe, foundational to a better life long term. These things are instrumental in helping us construct a world that is truly better for our kids than it was for us. Whatever rhetoric we want to use, I think that at the end of the day, these things are very productive in how they can help us, and getting ourselves to have the right mindset and right frame of reference to understand these things go a very long way to helping us shape the future we want to see. Um, we can always revisit this topic. It's fun to dissect and really get in there and really think and critique a lot of our daily actions and really reflect and engage in a discussion with other people who live different lives and therefore have a different set of conditions by which to judge their actions. One thing that may be beneficial and fantastic in your area would be devastating somewhere else. It would tear them apart. And it's in engaging in that difference in circumstances will help educate us to be more critical, to really think of better solutions. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end this episode real quick with some updates from some previous episodes and just climate news as a whole. And then we're going to go ahead and close out until next week. Um, According to an Ireland uh, journal, literally called the journal.ie, there are higher temperatures recorded very early in January that have broken records in several countries, such as Czechia, Poland, and Denmark. This is all part of a massive heat wave that is going over most of Europe that have, they've raised temperatures to an unseasonably warm time of year whenever it's supposed to be winter and snowing right now. Of particular note was in Belarus, which was 16.4 degrees centigrade, which is 61.5 degrees in Fahrenheit, which is 4.5 centigrade higher than the previous record, which was 53.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, this is supposed to be winter. We're talking about record-breaking warm temperatures in Europe in winter right now. Quote, the statistics speaks for themselves, unquote, says climatologist and professor at Maynooth University, Peter Thorne. Quote, normally if you break a record at any time of the year, you break it by tenths of a degree. In many parts of Central Europe in particular, all-time temperature records for January have been beaten by several centigrades of hundreds of stations have broken all-time records. Like, I think even whenever I read other parts of the article, it said like hundreds of stations all over Germany were breaking records, which is like unheard of. Um, yeah, that is a staggering thing to ignore if you're a climate change denier. Um, but yeah, it's just an important thing I felt needed to be heard. Along with that, I wanted to discuss two things that I saw about removing forever chemicals from production and from our water supply that I thought were interesting. This first one I found comes from scitechdaily.com. Little bit says a team of researchers from the University of Washington has created a new technique for destroying both PFOA and PFOS. These researchers develop a reactor that can completely break down difficult to destroy chemicals by employing, quote, supercritical water, unquote, which is formed at high temperatures and pressure. This method might aid in the treatment of industrial waste, the destruction of concentrated forever chemicals currently present in the environment, and the disposal of old stocks such as forever chemicals and firefighting foam. Assessing how well this technology could work for real world scenarios, you probably cannot treat the whole ocean like this, for example. But we could probably use this to treat existing problems such as forever chemical waste at manufacturing sites. This article, I believe, originally, or the research paper came out in November of last year. Um, the Now this site has recently put out this one, which originally brought my attention to these efforts. This specific article, I've taken little bits from Vice. They say the basic concept for this second treatment that I'm talking about. The basic concept removes PFAS by infusing a contaminated source with hydrogen, which causes water to release electrons and other particles that can weaken the strong molecular bonds in PFAS. The UV light pulses supercharges these reactions, speeding up the time it takes for the toxic chemicals to fall apart into harmless components. I believe they said that the time that this took in this process was just 45 minutes or something like that. The article then states later on, at this point, Liu and his colleagues have only tested out the method on two types of PFEA or PFA, known as octanoic acid (PFOA) and perfluorooctanosulfonic acid (PFOS), which was the same two forever chemicals from the reactor experiment earlier that I had mentioned in small volumes of tap water, measuring about 2 cups. So this whole experiment about the forever chemicals being eradicated in 45 minutes happened in a volume of tap water of 2 cups. However, the results were very promising. The effect of the hydrogen increased the degradation of PFOA from 10% to 95%, unquote. According to the study, quote, with 95% degradation achieved within 45-minute treatment, quote, at room temperature. Though the technique is one of many emerging efforts to deal with PFAS pollution, a recent project to use solvents to degrade a specific type of PFAS called PFCAs, as it has a relatively low energy. The process for this one has a relatively low energy footprint and does not produce harmful byproducts. So I'll probably look into forever chemical uh, degradation and the science and tactics to handle this in the future. Because this looks like it's a very interesting subject and a lot of promises are being made here. Um, but we're going to go over to Spain real quick. I saw a article that I thought was really great as far as legislation against companies go. This is from WIOnews.com. New environmental legislation in Spain will require tobacco businesses to pay for cleaning up the millions of cigarette ends that consumers throw away each year. Uh, the decision, which takes effect this Friday, is one of a number of policies intended to lessen waste and boost recycling. It forbids the use of cotton buds, expanded polystyrene cups, plastic straws, and single use plastic cutlery and plates, as well as restricts the use of plastics, foods, and packaging. That was just the very beginning of the article. It's definitely like worth reading more about the policies that go into it. I thought it was very interesting, especially just having some countries as a whole step getting countries or getting companies to actively take responsibility with what they have contributed for decades. Um, and in some cases centuries, depending on the company. Uh, it's monumental. It's important. It's the right approach for every country to take against companies. We need to hold these industry leaders uh, accountable. We need to hold them up to the effects that they have caused on us, the damage that they have caused on us, the death tolls that they have caused on us. That's why. Jumping over to France, according to France24.com, the article I pulled up here talks about how two climate activists have spray painted the front gates of the French Prime Minister's office on Wednesday in protest of what the campaign group, translated to English, is called Last Renovation, called climate crimes committed by the state. In a statement, Last Renovation said the state had failed to meet its commitment to help fight climate change. There was no immediate reaction from the Prime Minister's office. Just a little footnote, but something I wanted to mention about this thing is more and more groups I'm seeing get little small articles like this, and luckily I use Ground News, not a sponsor, but just a great resource that I use. Has highlighted a bunch of these small local events. While I've seen, I believe, Extinction Republic or Extinction Rebellion and other groups like Just Stop Oil, I believe, have claimed that they're going to stop using such like direct actions in their protests since it doesn't seem to be getting any major government to actually act on what they need to do. So they're going to focus on recruitment efforts and their political voicing for now, which is really a shame to hear because we need strong tactics. I don't think we need to back off, but that is a critical discussion for the future about appropriate actions there. One last thing as an update to the Iranian proto revolution, as I'm calling it. According to The Guardian, Aladutsti, which is a actress that was arrested, has been released from prison by the authorities after her friends and family provided bail. Pictures of her outside jail with campaigners holding flowers and without hijab were shown on Iranian social media. She She was arrested for supporting the proto revolution along with many other prominent writers and actors who wish to use their celebrity status to encourage moral support. You know, it's just a little bit of an update. Now, as a whole, a lot of messed up things going on in the world, but I'm glad to know that people are still fighting and people are still going strong for the multiple reasons that we need to fight are not only the powers that be, but the economic pressures that hold us down and keep killing the planet. I would love to keep going. I would like to keep talking, but this is the end of this episode, and I really need to lay down. This was a long one. I wasn't anticipating it for it to be so long, but I really want to make the effort to make these episodes worth it. So, with that being said, we're going to work on next week's episode. Haven't quite decided what it is yet, but hopefully, we have our intro and outro to make this a little bit better. So, hopefully, this is the last episode without that. I love you all. Remember, Mama Terra loves you. Have a great one, guys.